I want to start the story off by saying I am a 22-year-old guy living in a small town in upstate New York. My name is Kevin, and I won't use my last name for obvious reasons. My father, Steve, was a doctor and a brilliant man. He also died to save my life. Just a little over a year ago, I was desperately broke, not a penny to my name. You see, although my father had money, he really had more of the just 'cause I'm rich doesn't mean my kids are rich kind of attitude. Sure, he'd buy me food and give me a place to live, but he never bought me a car or paid for anything that wasn't necessary, like going to a concert with my friends or something. But he did do one thing, and that was finding me a job. I was 100% against it when he first told me about it. Being one of the biggest doctors in our area, he had tons of connections to the community, especially in his field. So his grand idea was to have me work at a psych ward. Father of the Year. Well, anyway, like I said, I was 100% against it. What, are you fucking crazy? I think were my first words in response. Hey, $25 an hour, was his response. That was enough for me to break, especially when my bank account balance was looking like a string of Cheerios. And before I said yes to him, however, I needed to know what I had to do. He told me I would basically be a janitor, to which I scrunched my face at, but that 25 an hour was too tempting. How the hell did you get me that wage? Do you know the guy or something? Sure do, he said. Bob Conti. I already talked to him on the phone yesterday. You walk down there tomorrow and you tell that guinea your pop says, lay off the chains. I was never going to say that to him. The next day, I rode my bike the 6 miles journey to Williams Asylum. The bleak white painted building had no life to it. It gave a crawling feeling to my skin. The front doors creaked when I opened them. The peeling paint crinkled under my fingers. I was immediately greeted by a 35-year-old woman sitting in a small lounge area. Hello, she said in a bubbly voice. How can I help you? She said, smiling. I'm Kevin, I said uneasily. Yeah, so I think I'm supposed to meet with Bob Conti? Oh, yes, she said. Bob is in his office right now. If you follow me, I can bring you right to him. Okay, I said as she was standing from her desk. She walked in a calm fashion, her high heels echoing off the corridor halls, clanking on every step. Her brown hair bouncing along with her rhythm. A little overdressed for the job, I thought. Bob, she called down the hall to the approaching door. Bob, you have a visitor. She paused. What's your name? She asked nicely. Kevin. Kevin is here to see you, she said through the doors. I'm Tammy, by the way, she said in a quieter tone to me. The door opened moments later with a tall man standing on the other side. Hello there, Kevin, he said in a tired voice. How can I help you? Yeah, my father talked to you on the phone about starting work here. He told me to talk to you, I said, unsure of the actions to take. Oh, right. Well, first off, I should start by showing you around the place, he said, leaving his office. Your main job will be feeding the patients and washing the bathrooms, and generally just keeping things clean around here." "Feeding him?" I questioned, uneasy of the task. "Well, really, all you have to do is just put the lunch tray through the feeding slot in their cells. It's not like you have to spoon feed them," he explained. I gave a sigh of relief. His way of speaking of the patients gave me the chills, though. He referred to them almost as animals. "Conti, is that Northern Italian?" I asked, trying to get to know him a bit. "What's that?" he said with a twist on his face. "Conti, that's Italian, right?" I asked again. "Oh, Conti. I'm sorry. I thought you said Monty," he said jokingly. "Yeah, Northern Italy. Good guess." I laughed and asked him to tell me a bit more about the job. "There are only 10 patients here, one of which is in 24-hour solitary. Not to scare you, but I must tell you, he is a murderer. He is clinically insane and not allowed in prisons, and under no circumstances are you to ever talk to him. He is very manipulative and violent. Please, for your own safety, if you ever have a concern or question about him, come to myself or Tammy," he said with a serious look in his eyes. I could instantly feel the direness of his words. "I understand," I said with a gulp. "Okay, anyway," he said, "right now the other 9 patients are in their rooms, and will get to come out a little later for their nightly hour of common room time. Believe it or not, most of them play board games, while a few play with the imaginary bunnies that walk around with them. It will take some time getting used to, but trust me, it's not as hard as it sounds." "I guess I'm gonna have to take your word on that one," I said. "This is the common room," he said as we rounded the corner to a small room with a few tables and chairs strewn about, a few different board games on the shelves. "All you have to do is sit right here for about an hour and make sure nobody kills anybody." My jaw dropped, unable to say anything. "So, I'm kidding. The other 9 inmates are nonviolent. They have 0 records of physical altercations. They've got some foul mouths, though, so be ready for that," he reassured. He showed me to the bathrooms and the holding cells and the rest of the grounds until finally the tour was over and we were back at his office. So, most of the time I'm in my office, doing paperwork for invoices and making sure I've made the orders for food shipments and whatnot. Ownership stuff. Anyway, you can always talk to Tammy if you need anything. She's usually at her desk. Think of her as your sub-boss. "Welcome aboard," he said with an extending handshake. "Well, what do I do now?" I said in an unsure voice. "Talk to Tammy. She will run you through the specifics," he said as he slowly closed the door. I walked down the winding, confusing hallways, finally making my way to Tammy's desk. "So," I said. "So this is most half the job," she said with her arms extended to the side. "Sitting on your ass and waiting for the day to end." What, really?" I asked skeptically. "Yep," she said. "You're looking at it." "So what am I supposed to do?" I still asked. "You know what? I can let the patients out early tonight so you can see how that works," she explained. "Bob shouldn't mind." I agreed, since I really had no other choice. We walked back down the maze of corridors to the long, narrow stretch of hallway extending from the common room. The long hall had 5 doors on each side, all identical, solid and white, with a tint of yellow from the aging. Each had a small slot in the door, which led to a tray-like feature on the other side. The decaying tiles on the wall had faded colors of pale brown. Tammy walked in front of me, jingling the keys in her hands while opening the first door on the right. "Here's old Jackson," she says as the door creaks open. A shadow-eyed man with gray hair slowly rose to his feet, his back hunched and purple bags sagging from the hollow sockets dug into his skull. He seemed to hardly have the energy to, saunter by me with an indifference to my existence. I was overwhelmed with feelings when I saw my first patient. The next few doors were the same story. Shells of human beings walking down the narrow hallway, dead-eyed and distant. Zombies. On the 6th floor, finally, there was a change. An older black man with an obvious scar running its length down the side of his head. He had short hair and one whitened eye. His appearance shocked me at first, but later intrigued me. I was desperate to know what happened to him. "What's up, man? I see you looking at me, dawg. I popped 3,000 or 4,000 people on the streets when I was on the streets. Now, what's up, man? I see you looking at me, dawg. I popped 3,000 or 4,000 people when I was on the streets." The man spoke in a quick manner, his words spitting from his mouth. He stood to his feet and walked by both Tammy and myself, still bantering about his stories. "I had 6 tigers, 4 lions, 17 mountain lions. The ones from the mountains, not the ones from Africa. Homeland. Shit, man. Lions, tigers, and bears." Tammy interrupted him. I assumed she was sick of his ramblings, as was I. "That's Rick. He probably won't answer to that though," she said. "Damn straight. I won't answer to that. Scar's the name," he said with a twisting face. Tammy rolled her eyes. "Moving on," she said. Cell 7 and Cell 8 had 2 older women who seemed to be very twitchy, flinching and ducking at things that weren't there, and eventually sprinting down the hall. "Anne! Kate!" she called them. Cell 9 held a young woman with fiery eyes. She had a tight muzzle strapped around her face, muffling her screams. Her eyes pierced straight through me with terror. Tammy had to practically drag her from her cell. "Oh, come on, Renee. He's not going to hurt you," Tammy kept reassuring her. The woman was desperately trying to scream words to myself and Tammy. She finally broke free from Tammy's grasp and manically sprinted down the hall. Tammy was swift after her, tackling her to the floor and crashing into the common room. The other patients watched in surprise. Tammy forcibly ripped the frightened patient to her feet, walking her back down the hall. She shoved her in the cell and slammed the door shut. "You can stay in there until you learn how to act in the common room," she screamed with fury to Renee. She slammed her hand 4 times on the door in clear anger. I had no idea what to do. I was frozen. I gulped as I watched the scene unfold. Tammy finally removed her attention from Renee, and the disgruntled patient. Ugh, she sighed out. I'm sorry, she mumbled. I don't think I can do this, I said as I slowly turned my back to her and began to leave the building. No, you can't leave, she said. We desperately need the extra help around here, as you can see. Her voice still trembling with stress, I now heard the haunting screams of a deeper voice. The man in cell 10. Also muffled by what I assumed was a muzzle. I took a deep breath, followed by a long stretch of silence. Come on, I can show you the games we play with some of the patients, she said with longing. Okay, I finally broke. It may have had something to do with her attractiveness, but her face was the definition of perfect, and her body wasn't far behind. She smiled wide with my acceptance to the rest of the job. We made our way to the common room, where the patients had been still dazzled by what they had seen. Who wants to play house? Tammy broke the silence with her question. Surprisingly, Jackson, Scar, Anne, and Kate all happily volunteered to join in on the game. The old man, Jackson, feebly rose his hand as if too afraid to ask a question. Yes, Jackson? Tammy questioned. Her voice held the tone that an adult would use with a toddler. Can I be the baby? His raspy voice seeped out. Well, of course you can be the baby, Jackson. You've already got your diapers on. She laughed. Jackson had a dopey-eyed smile on as he pulled his pants down to show us his shit-stained diapers. I instantly retracted on impulse. I gagged at the smell as the smell hit my nose, and I almost puked all over him. Kevin! Tammy shouted. You can't act like that around the patient. Oh, look, now he's crying. The skinny man sobbed uncontrollably and finally ran to the other corner of the room to sulk. Tammy left in a huff after the man, picking up a spare diaper on the way. Did baby Jackson make a poopy? She said with a smile. He giggled and lifted his legs in the air and as she stripped him and proceeded to change his diaper in the middle of the room. Once again, I was frozen in disbelief. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. This couldn't be legal. I was disgusted to the point of nausea. Meanwhile, Scar was lying on his back, panting like a dog and kicking his legs in the air. I'm the Poochio, he laughed hysterically. Bark, bark! Tammy popped her head up from her disgusting duty. Yes, you are, Rick. You're a good boy. I'm Scar, he screamed. Ruff, ruff. Arr! Jackson clapped his hands when Tammy was done changing his diaper. She slipped his pants back on and stood him to his feet. She quickly ran over to Scar and started rubbing his belly. He slapped his tongue out and rolled from side to side. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Hee, ruff. Kate perked her eyes and exclaimed that she wanted to be the wife. Wife? Tammy questioned. To me? That would make you a lesbian. You're not a lesbian, are you, Kate? No, I'm his wife, she said, pointing to me. I didn't know what to do. Once again, I looked to Tammy for guidance. She raised her eyebrows at me as if I should be playing along. Kate started walking towards me with a wide smile on her face. I stepped back a few feet, and she finally reached me. Her arms coiled around me tightly and squeezed. My hands shook as she squeezed even harder. I glared at Tammy, waiting for her to do something about it. "She's just playing, Kevin," Tammy said with no concern. "Are you sure?" I hardly managed to squeak out. Finally, Kate loosened her grasp and stood back. I took a breath in momentary calmness. Her hands struck back up and clenched my face. "Now, fuck me," she said as she pulled my face towards her. I twisted my body from her and shoved her away. Tammy quickly intervened and reprimanded Kate. I stormed out of the room, unable to process what was going on. I ended up sitting down in the front lobby, breathing heavily and staring out the front door. Looking back, I have no idea why I didn't walk out at that moment and just be done with it. Something told me to stay. I could distantly hear Tammy's screams to the patients, sending them all back to their rooms, clearly angry with Kate's behavior. Finally, she came to the lobby, a fluster in her breath. I said the first words before she could say anything. "This is fucked up," I said. "I seriously cannot do this shit." "Listen, Kevin, they're just excited to see someone new in here and just acting erratically. They are almost always calm and controllable," she tried to explain. "No, everything is fucked up," I said. "You're playing house with a bunch of loonies, and one of them wants to have sex with me." I defended my right of being upset. "You really should not refer to the patients like that," she said flatly. There was a long stretch of silence in the small lobby. "I think you should go home for the night and think about it," she said. "But I urge you, give it another shot tomorrow." I said nothing as I walked out the doors. The first thing I did when I got home was tell my dad about the events. I explained to him that I just couldn't do it. He insisted that I go back. "Come on, Kevin, don't make me look bad. Bob told me over and over again how they're struggling to find good workers around there. And here the man offers you $25 an hour and you say you can't do it? Just please, for your father, go back tomorrow." I couldn't say no to the man. Noon the next day, right back at it. Tammy was glad I was back. She even cooked me lunch. A few thinly cut pieces of venison between 2 thick slices of white bread. It was worth it coming back just for that sandwich. "Damn, that was amazing," I said. "I haven't had venison since I was like 6. Forgot how good it tasted." "Thanks," she said with a half-laughing smile. The next few hours, Tammy and I just sat, talking, waiting for the common room time, talking about mindless stuff. Finally, she decided it was time to let the patients out. We walked down the winding hallways to the common room. She told me to wait there while she released all the patients. She was back shortly after. A flood of wackos behind her. Some of the quieter ones began playing checkers with each other, while the other livelier group came to Tammy and myself. "Have I ever told you I used to have 8 Komodo dragons?" Scar chimed in. "Names were Charlie, Bruce, Little Terry, Big Terry, Sebastian." "Okay, who's ready to play house?" Tammy asked, cutting Scar off. They all jumped for excitement when she suggested it. It just creeped me out. Their facial expression chilled me, and I I just needed to leave the room. Where's the bathroom, Tammy? Just down the hall past the cells room, she told me. I quickly left the room, jetting past the cell hallway, hearing the haunting muffled screams of the man in cell 10. Chills ran through my whole body. I finally made it to the bathroom. I didn't even have to go. I just sat on the toilet for about 10 minutes until I could gather my thoughts. I walked back down the hall slowly, not even really wanting to get back to the common room. The man had seemed to have stopped screaming, at least. I got closer to the hall and my spine tingled. Before long, I was standing at the end of the long, dead-end hallway, directly in front of cell 10. I was strangely curious, with the same longing feeling to look down when you're standing atop a towering ledge. I was staring at the pale white door. There was no sound whatsoever, no movement, no breathing, no screaming. Nothing. I crouched down, slowly moving my face to the feeding slot. Peeking through with my eyes, I could barely see anything. Mostly shadows and obstructed view of the feeding tray. I knelt down to try to get a better glance. As I repositioned myself, I noticed something on the floor just by the doorframe. A small puddle of deep red blood, pooling a few inches out from the door. I lost my breath. As I looked back up through the slot, I was staring at two bloodshot eyes, split open in terror. I fell to my back, fear engulfing my body. My head slammed on the door of cell 9, directly across the hall from cell 10. I had forgot there was a patient in cell 9, that is, until she started her screaming again. The man in cell 10 started slamming what I assumed was his face or hands against the door. I quickly scrambled to my feet and started making my way back to the common room to tell Tammy that the patient was bleeding. At the end of the hall, stood Kate. Her eyes pierced me. "Hello, husband," she said coldly. She started walking towards me with haste. I didn't even hesitate to burst by her. I slammed her body against the wall and ran the narrow hallways to the common room. Tammy was sitting on the couch with her back to me, while the patients wandered free to do what they like. "Are you even paying attention?" I screamed at her. "You've got crazy fucks walking all over the place, and you're just sitting here." My words were cut off from the shock of what I was seeing as I walked to the front side of the couch. Jackson laid on his side, his head in her lap, while he sucked on her exposed nipple. "What the fuck is going on here?" I screamed in disbelief. Tammy quickly jumped up, putting her breast back in her shirt. "Feed the baby! Feed the baby!" Jackson happily exclaimed. "He's just playing," Tammy pleaded. I shook my head in disgust. "I'm going to tell Bob." "No, you can't!" she screamed as she followed after me. I made it to Bob's office much quicker than she had, opening the door unannounced. He was sitting at his desk, the barrel of a pistol in his mouth. He looked at me with surprise and pulled it out of his mouth swiftly. I was in shock. He quickly turned to anger. "Never interrupt me during my private time!" His voice shaking in rage. His face turned red with fury as he stood from his desk. The photo on his medical license hung in contrast on the wall behind him. His calm, smiling face on the document seemed to mock him from behind. I looked at the photo with more focus. Dread seeped into my soul, for I came to realize the man in the photo on the wall and the man behind the desk were not the same people. My heart sunk. At first, I had no idea what to do. I backed out of the office slowly until I came into contact with Tammy. She was hysterical and screaming that I not tell Bob. The intense skittishness of myself at the time caused me to backhand her with reactive fear. She fell to the ground instantly, the keys to the cells sliding across the hall. My gut wrenched as the gears in my head started turning, piercing together what I thought was happening. I snatched the keys and sprinted down the twisting halls, dodging the wandering, dead-eyed patients. I went straight to cell number 10 and twisted the key in the door. My suspicions were confirmed when I saw the man, the same man from the photo in the office, Bob Conti. My stomach twisted, and I nearly threw up when I realized what I had eaten earlier in the day. He had multiple hunks of meat removed from his thigh, blood running down his legs and pooling on the ground. Before I could even react, I glanced down the long, tight hallway to see Tammy, standing still with a petrifying twist in her eyes, a knife with dried blood dangling from her right hand, her head tilted, and a soul-killing smile crept across her face. I stepped away, my back hitting the dead-end wall. She moved with inhuman speed towards me, the knife raised with intent. She hissed at me with loudness of a frightened cat. I stumbled over my own feet and fell into the cell. She slammed the door shut and made chilling cackles of laughter. "Did someone get scared?" she giggled through the feeding slot. She jabbed the knife through the hole repeatedly, boisterously laughing with insanity. She finally walked away, leaving us locked in the room. I had the keys, but they served no purpose from inside that cell. I removed Bob's muzzle, and he explained to me what happened, and that the woman in cell 9, Renee, was his receptionist. There was nothing we could do. I spent the next 18 hours in that God-forsaken cell, waiting for my death. I'm sure most of you are wondering about my father, and why I started the story off explaining that he died to save my life. When I didn't come home that night, he must have been extremely worried. He wanted to speak with Bob in person to see if he had heard from me or knew where I had gone. The man who impersonated Bob shot and killed my father, but not before he called the police to let them know something was wrong. The man behind the desk died in a shootout with the police, and they had to use a blowtorch to open the doors to both cell 10 and cell 9. Renee was somewhat back to normal within the first year, but Bob never recovered. I don't think I have either. The police say there was never a woman in the building or around the area that matched the description of Tammy. It's been a year now. The reason I'm telling you this story is because last night I saw Tammy. There's no mistaking it. Her face has been burned into my mind. She was standing in front of my house, just staring with cold eyes. I have no idea how she could have found me. No explanation whatsoever. I'm in serious fear for my life. I've already contacted the police, and they will be keeping an eye on my house day and night. I cannot live my life with this perpetual fear.